What's happening right now in the Middle East could define not just the next few days, but maybe the next few weeks for the entire region. Because the ceasefire with Iran is still in place, yes, but it's hanging by a very thin thread. And the most delicate point isn't just in Tehran, not even in Lebanon. The most delicate point today is about a name that many people might hear every day, but don't always realize its importance: the Strait of Hormuz. Greetings, I'm Ari, and let's get right to this update on the situation here in Israel, in the region, regarding everything related to the war we're involved in between the United States and Israel against Iran and its proxies. At this moment, the most important thing to understand is that the talks between the United States and Iran did not end with an agreement. They ended with a tense pause with some agreements. There were mutual accusations and a sense that no one really left the table satisfied. The negotiations in Islamabad were the first high-level direct talks between Washington and Tehran in more than a decade. And they lasted for long hours with moments of tension, changes in tone, and an atmosphere of absolute distrust between the parties. In the end, the Vice President of the United States, Baines, clearly stated that there was no agreement and that the U.S. delegation was returning immediately to the United States without closing any deal. And here is the key point that we must not lose sight of. The ceasefire announced this week was never real peace. It was never the final outcome of the war. It was more like a 2-week operational pause to try to arrange a bigger negotiation. And this negotiation had two fundamental pillars. First, what will happen with the Iranian nuclear program? And second, who really controls navigation in the Strait of Hormuz, which is one of the most sensitive points on the planet right now? Everything that has to do with the oil that powers entire countries. Well, not just oil. A large amount of gas also passes through there. The United States arrived in Islamabad with very tough and clear demands. According to Reuters and Israeli media, Washington asked Iran to completely stop enrichment, to dismantle key facilities, to transfer its highly enriched uranium, and also to stop funding Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis. And along with this, it demanded a full reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. On the Iranian side, the position was exactly the opposite on several points. Tehran demanded control over the strait, war reparations, the release of frozen assets, and a regional ceasefire, much broader, including the Lebanese front, where right now Israel is fighting a tough battle, a tough war against Hezbollah. This was the central clash in all of it. Put simply, Iran did not agree to come to the table only to leave it without nuclear capability and without regional influence. And the United States did not want to sign a pause that would leave both things intact for Iran. That's the reason why the dialogue didn't collapse dramatically, but it also didn't produce a concrete result. Everything was left in a kind of limbo. There is no agreement, there is no firm peace, but there isn't a total breakdown either that would automatically lead us to a full-scale war again. Now, the other big issue, and perhaps the most dangerous in the short term, is obviously Hormuz. Because here we're not talking about a symbol, but about a global energy lifeline. Through that strait, about 20% of the world's energy supply passes through. But for some countries, like Japan, for example, more than 70% of the oil they use in their country goes through there. And that's why every statement about the Strait of Hormuz moves markets, creates nervousness, and alters military calculations. Today has been completely shaken up by Trump's statements. He announced that the United States Navy will begin the process of blockading the strait, that it will seek to intercept vessels that have paid tolls to Iran, and that it will also start destroying mines placed in the area. I want to quote President Trump's statement on his social network verbatim because it's worth hearing. Pay close attention. I quote, "So there you have it. The meeting went well. Most of the points were agreed upon, but the only point that really mattered, the nuclear one, was not." With that, effective immediately, the United States Navy, the best in the world, will begin the process of blocking each and every ship that tries to enter or leave the Strait of Hormuz. At some point, we will reach a situation where everyone will be able to enter, everyone will be able to leave, But Iran has not allowed that to happen simply by saying there might be a mine out there somewhere, a mine that no one knows about.
Excepto ellos.
This is global extortion, and the leaders of countries, especially those of the United States of America, will never be extorted. I have also instructed our Navy to search for and intercept any vessel in international waters that has paid a toll to Iran. No one who pays an illegal toll will have safe passage on the high seas. We will also begin to destroy the mines. Iran, the Iranians, place them in the Straits. Any Iranian who fires at us or at peaceful vessels will be sent to hell. Iran knows better than anyone how to end this situation that has already devastated their country. Their navy no longer exists. Their air force no longer exists. Their anti-aircraft defense and radar are useless. Khamenei and most of their leaders are dead due to their nuclear ambition. The blockade will begin shortly. Other countries will be involved in this blockade. Iran will not be allowed to benefit from this illegal act of extortion. They want money and, more importantly, they want nuclear capabilities. Also, and at the right time, we are fully prepared and armed. And our military will finish off what little is left of Iran.
But before I dive in, I want to share with you the story of this vial, which amazed me, and I think you should know about too. This vial holds an unbelievable story that was unheard until now. Inside is earth from the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, rescued by archaeologists after thousands of years of history were dumped as rubble. It is our opportunity to prevent history from disappearing. Start the new year with a personal connection to Jerusalem. Click the link in bio or scan the code to enjoy a special offer.
Donald Trump, end quote. That concludes President Trump's statement. This announcement cannot be taken lightly and is truly confrontational. And it is for a very specific reason. Because it's one thing to say you want to guarantee freedom of navigation, and quite another to publicly announce a naval blockade in one of the most sensitive areas on the planet, facing a regional power that has already said it considers those waters under its operational control. That obviously changes the entire tone of the crisis. We're no longer just talking about negotiators discussing terms in a foreign capital. We're talking about ships, mines, escorts, interdictions, and the possibility that any miscalculated maneuver could lead to a direct clash. And Tehran has already responded. Obviously, it wasn't going to waste any time. The Revolutionary Guards said today that any military ship that tries to approach the Strait will be seen as a violation of the ceasefire. At the same time, they stated that Hormuz is open to non-military vessels under specific regulations and under Iran's prudent management. Pay close attention to that because the whole fight is summed up in that single sentence. For Washington, the goal is to fully open the passage and take away Iran's ability to use this point as a tool of pressure. For Iran, the goal is exactly the opposite. To ensure that the passage exists, yes, but under conditions, supervision, and Iranian authority. And here comes a very important detail that sometimes gets lost among the headlines we read every day. Reuters also reported that despite the failure of the talks, 3 loaded supertankers managed to pass through Hormuz, meaning the Strait is not completely paralyzed. But it's not back to normal either. Or rather, beyond the Reuters headline, could it be that these tankers paid some kind of toll, as Trump hinted in his statement? The fact is that we are not in a scenario of a complete closure, but neither are we in a safe and stable reopening. We are in an extremely unstable middle ground, where every move can be presented by one of the parties as a provocation. And that's from a physical standpoint. What about the United States? A ceasefire is not sustained by trust. It's sustained by calculation, by strategy. The United States still calculates that negotiation, no matter how bad it is still preferable to launching another phase of open war without having resolved the Strait of Hormuz. Iran calculates that it's in its interest to buy time, stand firm on its red lines, and avoid appearing to be the side that breaks off the process first. And while both sides are calculating, the front remains hot. This is the reality. Now then, what scenarios could unfold in the coming days or weeks? The first scenario, and perhaps the least explosive, is a technical extension of the ceasefire. Not because the parties are close to a comprehensive agreement, but because they still prefer to negotiate under pressure rather than resume a full military campaign. In fact, both Reuters and the Israeli media outlet GN reported signs that Pakistan is still trying to extend the truce and keep the channel open. That would be a scenario of high tension, aggressive statements, limited operations, and more rounds of talks. We don't know for how long. The second scenario is one of controlled naval escalation. What does this mean? That total war does not immediately return, but that we do see a standoff in Hormuz with interceptions, ship movements, mine removal, threats, and maybe isolated incidents. That scenario is very dangerous because many times wars don't break out just because of a clear political decision, but because of a sequence of tactical events that can no longer be contained. A miscalculation in Hormuz would have an immediate impact, not only military but also economic on a global level. The third scenario is the collapse of the truce and the resumption of major attacks against Iran. That scenario obviously cannot be ruled out. The Israeli outlet Icon reported today that, according to a security source, there is a willingness in Israel to resume the war against Iran and that they are waiting for a decision from Trump. Here, the feeling in Israeli society is that Israel will take advantage of the situation, however it happened, to resume an open war against Iran. The Israeli says that Iran will always be a latent threat. We're not talking about the majority of the population, but a large part of the Israeli population thinks this way, that this window in which so much damage has been done to Iran cannot simply be used to leave the war, so to speak, unfinished and just wait for Iran. 2, 3, 4, 7, 5 years later, they rearm, and what we're seeing right now happens again. So what we're saying here is that it may not happen tomorrow, but it does mean that within the Israeli system, this option is still alive and hasn't been put away in a drawer. If Washington concludes that Tehran is only buying time, the window for another military round could open up again very quickly. Now, there's a fourth scenario that I find especially important, and that the Iran issue and the Lebanese front end up becoming even more decoupled. Because one of the major disputes in Islamabad was precisely this, that Iran wants to include Lebanon in the negotiation package. Israel and the United States maintain that this is not true. And while this is happening on the ground, Israel continues to conduct heavy operations against Hezbollah in Lebanon. Israel continues to attack rocket launchers during the night. And in Israeli communities near the border, alarms for incoming fire from Lebanon kept sounding throughout the entire weekend. At the same time, Israeli media reported that in the Bin Habel area, Israeli forces found Hezbollah infrastructure inside a Lebanese government hospital, including weapons, and that several operatives were killed after opening fire from this area. It was also reported that 2 Israeli soldiers were moderately wounded in a clash in this area over the weekend. That is, even though the media focus is on Iran and Hormuz, the north of Israel remains active and continues to be a real source of military and political attrition for Israel. But at the same time, there's another sign that shouldn't be ignored. It was reported that a security source mentioned reducing some of the attacks in Lebanon in the coming days, especially in Beirut, ahead of the start of talks between representatives of Israel and Lebanon in Washington. So, to be very objective, the Lebanese front today doesn't seem to be heading toward a clean de-escalation. It actually seems to be heading toward a hybrid formula. Israeli operations continue, Hezbollah doesn't disappear from the map and manages to keep attacking. And at the same time, diplomatic efforts to prevent this from escalating. In other words, there's no complete solution there either. Only crisis management. And in the midst of all this, another rather unsettling signal appeared from Turkey. President Erdogan escalated his rhetoric against Israel again and said that Turkey could take military action, as it did in Libya and Karabakh. He also linked his words to the failure of diplomacy and accused the enemy during the truce. At the same time, verbal attacks on Netanyahu from Turkey also continued, including extremely harsh rhetoric. For now, this remains in the realm of rhetoric and political pressure, not an imminent Turkish military escalation. But when a regional leader uses this language in the midst of such a fragile truce, like the one the president of NATO is talking about right now, this doesn't help stabilize anything at all. It just adds more fuel to the fire in a region already saturated with threats. Another piece of news worth looking at is that Saudi Arabia summoned the Iraqi ambassador over threats from drones launched from Iraqi territory against the kingdom and other Gulf countries. Why does this matter? Because it confirms that the regional network of militias and Iran's allied actors continues to be an active factor, even in the midst of the ceasefire. In other words, even though Washington and Tehran are negotiating, the regional chessboard is still full of pieces that can ignite new flashpoints at any moment. And all of this, then, gives us a pretty clear picture of the situation as of today, April 12th. The ceasefire exists, but it hasn't solved the root of the problem. The talks didn't resolve anything at all. Essentially, Hormuz remains the most explosive point on the board. Israel keeps up the pressure on Hezbollah and does not accept that the Lebanese front will automatically be frozen by the truce with Iran. Turkey is threatening again, and other regional actors continue to move under the radar. Now, my most objective reading of all this is the following. I don't think we're on the verge of peace, but I also don't think that everyone, all the parties involved, want to return to total war today or tomorrow like we saw a week ago. What I do see is a phase of maximum pressure where each actor will try, in an imminent situation, to make sure nothing is lost. This moment,
en la mano. Estados Unidos
organized into what has become an imminent situation, a moment that has become imminent, and nothing could be done, nothing could be achieved, to make it clear that he is not going to accept a deal that freezes him. Threats remain intact in Lebanon, and Hezbollah, although hit, continues to bet on resisting and not being left out of the game. That's the situation today. Not a solution, but a wide-open game. The question then is not only whether the ceasefire will survive. The real question is at what cost it will survive and who will give in first on the two issues that blocked everything. The Iranian nuclear program, of course, and control of the Strait of Hormuz. Because as long as this isn't resolved, any truce will be just a pause. And in the Middle East, as we've seen many times before, pauses can also be the prelude to something much bigger and more serious. Let me know in the comments which scenario you think is more likely. An extension of the ceasefire? An escalation in Hormuz? Or a return to stronger attacks leading to a full-scale regional war? And well, if you value this kind of analysis, from here, from Israel, subscribe to the channel, share this video, and don't leave without giving it a like. See you.